So this is a high temperature, short time pasteurizer. We've got a minimum requirement of 72 to meet, with a minimum holding time of 15 seconds. The other option is a batch pasteurizer, and for that you need to hold the milk for 30 minutes at about 63 degrees. And it's coming back out of the pasteurizer at 26.8, back and fed back into the cheese room, where it's starting to fill up the cheese vat. Okay, so everything is filtered. The milk is coming through from the pasteurizer, and we're using just an ordinary sock filter to catch anything that may have found its way through the initial filtrations.
This is a freeze-dried lactic acid bacteria. I'm going to be adding this to the vat for a DVI, or direct vat inoculation. This will start the fermentation process, and it'll start eating the lactose.
So we've added the rennet, so that's can be an animal or a vegetarian rennet, and it sets the curd, so it coagulates it and makes it become a big block of curd ready to cut. So some of the rennet will be retained in the curd after cheese making, which will then influence the flavour development during the ripening process.
So the milk has coagulated after the addition of rennet, and it's trapped the moisture in the curd. I'm now checking to see if the curds have set after the addition of rennet. I'm looking for a nice clean break, which I've got. There's nothing on the end of my finger. I can check against the sides, and it should separate cleanly from there with a nice break. We need to start removing the moisture and separating the curds in the whey. And the whey is just liquid water with proteins, and there'll be some fats left in. I want to ideally keep the fats as much as possible in the curd. We're now going to be cutting the curd into thousands upon thousands of tiny pieces. We're using a curd knife today. People use lots of different tools, and they cut them to different sizes depending on the kind of cheese that they're making. Ours are going to be approximately 1 centimetre along. We're just going down gently into the curd, and we're going to go backwards, forwards, and then following over each other, and then we'll go horizontally, and this will give us lots of small pieces. We need to separate the curds in the whey, and we're increasing the surface area in total to give us better drainage. You can see that it's very fragile and it's breaking underneath my cut, so I need to be consistent and firm throughout. If you were to make a soft cheese or a camembert, you'll be doing it much larger pieces than this. So they're now cut into approximately centimetre pieces. There are some larger ones which we can just separate. It's that delicate. If you're making a soft style cheese, you may be moulding up just after cutting, with or without stirring. After about 24 hours, the curds will shrink to about 1/3. Now stirring the curd. And the idea of stirring is that we're helping to separate the curds in the whey. I'm now draining 10% of our whey. The reason for this is that we're going to be washing the curds. This is very specific to the type of cheese that we're making. The idea is that we'll be taking away some of the lactose in there that would become lactic acid. So I'm starting to top up the water. It's at 36 degrees at the moment. Adding more water to the whey takes away the bit of the acidity. It'll affect the finishing characteristics of our product. You can just turn it like this, bring it out, and put it down where Steve will then take it and put it onto our press. These, after they've been turned again before I go home, will be pressed overnight at about 1.5 bar. Generally, that's specific to what we want to achieve. And they'll sit there overnight until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. At that point, I'll then take them off the press one by one, and I'll turn them out, and I'll put them into the brine where they'll stay for 24 hours.
Brine is a solution of salt and water, and this will sit, all of them, or 60 of them, will sit in these 3 tanks until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. So that's the first job tomorrow morning, is to take the cheeses out of the brine to effectively make way for the new batch of cheeses that are coming through. Right, so having taken the cheeses out of the brine, they then come into what we call the drying room. Again, this is the way we do it, but that's not necessarily the way everybody does it. They're placed on these racks. It allows them to drip dry, and the temperature in here is quite cool, and there's a lot of airflow in here, and also dehumidification to get them to dry out, so that they're then in a position where we can get on and plastic out them. Okay, well here we're applying something called plastic coat, and we actually, and you'll see from what Amy's doing, we paint it on with a sponge. It's just a very thin layer, and it's a sort of outer layer that seals up the outside of the cheese. It's not like wax, so wax doesn't allow the cheese to breathe. This allows the cheese to breathe, and would be used on a lot of continental style cheeses. Right, so we now find ourselves in the old Winchester store, and these will come in here for final ripening. Temperature, the humidity and the airflow is all pretty well controlled. We need to keep a pretty fine eye on it. During the course of their life, and these cheeses will be in here probably for 3 months, something like that, the cheeses are all turned, and so the older they get, the less times we turn them. So this is now starting to get quite dry, and so we would just go down and flip them over like that. And that's just to balance the whey within because there's still a little bit of whey in there, and if you don't turn them, the moisture sinks to the bottom, and we need to keep the moisture in the middle and not one side or the other. Right, so we've now moved into the Stony Cross store. Stony Cross, although fundamentally not a lot different from the way we make the other cheeses, is ripened completely differently. In this instant, we're using a more cave environment to engender this mold, this grey mold on the surface, which when you actually stroke it, it's almost like velvet. And it doesn't penetrate the cheese, it just gives it the rind, and just gives it a sort of slightly earthy, very slightly bluey, slightly mushroomy flavour. We need to keep an eye on how much mould we've got on them, because the mould will just completely take over if you're not careful. So once a week we use a very light brush, natural hair brush, and the guys will come in and just give them a little brush and just knock the mould down to a manageable level. It does get a little bit dusty in here, but you can see that has now been brushed down. If we hadn't brushed it down, the mold would be probably half an inch thick. So we do just control the mold with a brushing once a week. Every week we'll grade our cheeses, and we'll take a cheese from every batch, and we'll just see what we've got in here. If you look on the back of the cheese iron there, we're looking for a nice smooth coating of fat on the back of the cheese iron. We'll just take a little chunk off the end and then just warm it up a little bit, because the temperature in there is probably 12 or 13 degrees. Just give it a little smell. If there's something seriously wrong, the smell will very quickly tell you that there's an issue. It's absolutely fine. Nice, clean, fresh.